Hey everyone, I'm Andy Fellows. I make videos about destructive cults, damaging norms, and just generally bad ideas. Before we get started, I just want to take a second to talk to you about my Patreon. When I hit 15 patrons over on Patreon, I'm going to be starting a podcast, which is going to be available exclusively to patrons of the supporter tier. On that podcast, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about cults from my personal point of view and sharing some more experiences and just generally talking about things that I can't necessarily say on a monetized YouTube channel. So if that sounds like something that you'd be interested in and you want to make that happen, then you can do that by becoming a patron at the supporter tier level. That's the $5 level. There's a link to my Patreon in the live chat, whichever side that is, and in the description below. If you'd like to consider becoming a patron, that would be incredible and I'd be massively grateful for that. Partly because having patrons is incredible and partly because I'm really excited to get on with this podcast. As soon as we hit 15 patrons, the wheels are going to start turning on that. Anyway, now that that's said, let's get on with the video. It goes without saying that festive celebrations inside cults aren't quite what they are for the rest of us on the outside of cults. For the most part, generally speaking. If you're not outright banned from celebrating Christmas or something like that, then your view of those celebrations, they're going to be changed by the cult's map of reality. It is, after all, the cult's job to basically sever ties between you and the outside world and make you have the cult be the most important thing in your life. This time of year traditionally is a family-oriented time of year. And with so many cults intent on cutting people off from their families, there's gonna be a lot of people estranged from their loved ones this time of year. This happens for a lot of reasons. Every single cult has its own reason, its own excuse, its own justification for the things that it does. Each cult has its own map of reality, right? Some groups disparage Christmas and celebrations like it altogether. Others have created such a high control environment that actually it's almost impossible for people to get a break from that temporarily to go and see their loved ones and similar things like that, especially at a time of year that is traditionally family oriented. Some, if not most, groups will turn the festive attention and the joy and excitement and, the celebration feelings towards the cult. They will have the cult members redirect what they would have celebrated within whatever tradition that they were raised in or whatever. They'll have that attention, that energy turned around and focused on the cult. I mean, this isn't limited to just festive celebrations, really. I mean, that kind of thing happens all year round in quite a lot of groups. As long as people don't see something outside the group as good, that's good for the cult. That's good for the leader, basically. In the video that I put up most recently, Mystical Manipulation and How Cults Make You Believe, what you see there is that seemingly disparate cults have a lot in common. They have a lot of similarities, especially when you examine them more closely and you stack the experiences of the members side by side, like I did in the previous video with the help of my wonderful guests. And if you haven't seen that video, I highly recommend it. I'm really proud of it. And honestly, the way that it turned out is better than I could have imagined. It does a really good job, I feel, of showing how similar, seemingly polar different cults are. You wouldn't think that a cult based in India, which has come out in some way of the Hindu tradition, would be so similar to something like Scientology or the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Watchtower. So if you haven't seen that, go and watch that after this video, because I'm really happy with it. And honestly, I think it makes a really good point. Despite those parallels, however, different cults deal with pre-cult relationships in different ways. Some will stop you seeing certain people. Others are a little bit more relaxed about seeing family and so on and so forth. Some groups require a member to have special dispensation before they can leave wherever they are or go and see someone. Other groups still, and this list is not a conclusive list of how groups deal with family as I say, there's so many different ways that this works, so many different groups, and each group has their own way of doing this kind of thing. The group that I was involved with was primarily primarily an online thing, though there was an in-person physical component, which I talked a little bit about with Chris Shelton. If you haven't seen the podcast episode I did with him on his Sensibly Speaking podcast, highly recommend that. I'll stick a link to that above in a card or something so you can check that out afterwards, and in the description as well. The group that I was involved in, it didn't necessarily discourage you from speaking to your family and your friends, but the way that the processes that you were encouraged to engage in, which were incredibly damaging, the way that those processes worked, ultimately, and for at least for me, and for a number of other people that I've spoken to who have since left the group, they damage your relationships with your family, with your friends, and so on. For like a year while I was involved with this group, I didn't talk to my dad or his side of the family, because I had come to believe that he was a bad person, that he had done bad things, and that he was inherently flawed in some way. I've since coming out and since recognizing what happened there in my mind and what was going on in my life, I have a great relationship with my dad now and his side of the family. In fact, closer than ever, I think, which is kind of ironic because I've moved to another country. I've spoken to him about my involvement and stuff, and I asked him about what he was thinking while I was, pulling away and stuff. And he said to me what he wanted to try and be in that moment wasn't a wall, but a cushion. Like, he didn't want to be something that I was banging up against all the time. He wanted to be a kind of person that I could be who I was being, and I could, batter against it if necessary, but it wasn't going to damage anything overall. That relationship didn't need to be damaged. We didn't need to not talk for a year. It wasn't just my dad that I had my relationship kind of affected with. My mum's side of the family, or my siblings as well. It was weird. I wasn't there. Like, I was there, but I wasn't there. And there's some more to say on that point, I think, later as well. The real crux of this is that during these processes, I was reinterpreting my experiences, reinterpreting my relationships and my ideas, such that I was demonizing certain people, making myself feel like a victim to them, and then kind of just withdrawing or cutting myself off from them. Because, again, following the advice of the cult leader, following these processes, I started to see my family as bad and myself as better, although also a victim, which is its own kind of quirk with this group. I am, as with my dad, I'm glad to say that my relationships with the rest of my family have improved and they're a lot better now, although there are friendships that I did lose at the time, which I haven't got back, unfortunately. I'm not telling you that to get sympathy. I don't want to get you to feel sorry for me, really. The reason I'm saying that is because I want to drive home the realities of groups like the ones that I was involved with at any opportunity, any instance I can. I want to do that because despite the fact that we're all prepared to admit that the internet and social media and the media in general and so on are capable of influencing us, and there are people on the internet whose literal job title is social media influencer now, we still don't really want to admit that online cults exist in the way that they do, and we don't want to always admit or even call it a cult. And I understand the reluctance to call it a cult, because when you stack a group like the one I was involved with next to, the big famous cults that end in things I can't say because of demonetization, then it's understandable that there will be some reluctance there. However, these groups do exist and they do cause damage. You don't have to be in front of someone physically to become convinced that they are humanity's savior and that they're the only one capable of solving the problem that they see needs to be solved and have now convinced you needs to be solved. Back to the topic a little bit. Being around families tends to break down cult programming. And I am going to talk about Christmas a bit here because it's what I grew up on. I'm sorry if anyone feels excluded from that. I'm just speaking from my personal experience at this point. With Christmas in particular, because it's such a family thing, it's dependent on you being an individual as part of a whole. At least in a healthy situation, in a healthy family, I would say. You as a individual play a part in the family experience that's made what it is by individuals coming together and interacting in the way that that given family does. cults are going to want to keep you away from that because they've created a new identity. They've created a new personality for you. You now have this new version of you which you live as. So to come away from that and then go and spend time with family, that's not going to be great for the cult because your identity, your old identity, is going to start to resurface. These are the people that know the you beneath the cult you. They love the you beneath the cult you, right? You have patterns with them. You laugh with them. You argue with them. Not on Christmas, obviously, because it's Christmas. Don't be a dickhead. I don't care if you burnt the Brussels sprouts. I don't care if it's all a disaster and everything's coming apart at the seams. It's Christmas, so push that emotion way down. It's Christmas, especially when it comes to presents and family banter and what you do with that one person who drinks too much and falls asleep on the sofa. Do you leave them be? Do you get them a blanket so that they're warm? Do you draw on their face? Do you slowly and gently pick them up and move them outside so they wake up on the lawn? That kind of stuff isn't possible if you're the carbon copy of a cult leader. You want what the cult wants you to want. If the cult says no, generally speaking, you say no. One side of my family narrowly escaped an adult life dominated by the Watchtower. So for them growing up, Christmas wasn't a thing, which naturally means that for us and the people that are no longer in that religion, that organization, that cult, and those of us who grew up not inside the cult, Christmas, huge deal. Like, massive deal for us. We gave it our all. And money was fairly tight most of the time, but without fail, every year, us kids had a pile of presents to wake up to. When I joined the cult, this pretentious new age attitude came in. And I was always at least once removed from the situation. I was once removed from the enjoyment of it all. Suddenly, Christmas wasn't good because I'd read the Wikipedia page on Saturnalia, and my relationships with my family and myself were going through this cult filter. I was seeing everything through the cult lens. So I wasn't fully present anymore. I wasn't enjoying it really anymore. A part of me was playing out the patterns, and there's another part of me inside my head that's kind of just not there, disconnected, and judging everything and everyone, including myself. And then the rest of the year in general, whenever my family talked to me, they were talking to me through that cult filter, through that cult personality. So they're talking to the me underneath, but I am talking back and hearing what they're saying and filtering it through the cult map of reality. The real me is buried between layers of spiritual truth and all these revelations that I've gained from doing these processes and now I believe I understand myself better, so I'm not connecting with them. I'm not there really. I'm present, but I'm not there, My head was a mess, honestly. And I'm still recovering from that. I'm better off now I'm out. My mental health has improved so much since I'm out. My relationships have improved. My life in general has improved. But there's some stuff that hangs on. And I would be lying to you now if I sat here and said that I got out scot-free. I think back over my time involved in that whole thing and being my cult self, as it were. And I feel like my family probably were aware to some extent that something was going on. Obviously my dad was, because I just didn't talk to him for a year, and his side of the family were aware. My mum's side of the family, I think they probably knew something was going on, but I don't think that they ever really put their finger on what it was. If they had recognized what was happening, I don't necessarily know that they'd have known what to do with that. And that's understandable. Most people wouldn't, I don't think, unless you've done the research and educated yourself on how cults work and what undue influence is and stuff. Chances are you're not going to know what to do in a situation like that. So with that said, with that in mind, I want to share something that I've been doing with cult members that I talk to, which I actually got from Steven Hassan's Combating Cult Mind Control, which is a brilliant book on this. If you haven't read it already, I do highly recommend that. I'll stick a link to the Amazon page in the description below for that. But yeah, I do highly recommend that book. And what I'm talking about here is effectively what he talks about in the book when he's talking about mini deprogrammings. And the idea here is that you want to plant seeds of deprogramming in their mind, just sort of gently while you're talking to them without putting their back up, without upsetting them. And again, the key word here is always non-threatening, which Hassan uses as well. You don't want to scare them. You don't want to make them angry. You don't want to make them feel like you're saying you're in a cult, you need to get out. Don't make them wrong. Just don't make them wrong in this if you can. Just be gentle. The most important thing here, I think, is your relationship and protecting your relationship with them, because you want to protect that relationship. When people are in a cult, the cult is either going to turn the relationships into potential leads for recruitment, or they're going to want you to cut that person out, generally speaking. That's what I've seen, at least in my research. If you're in a situation where you're talking to someone who's in a cult and you have a relationship with them, family, friendship, whatever, you want to protect that relationship. You want to stay connected with them emotionally in a positive way and not put their back up, not attack them, not make them feel like they're wrong, because all that's going to do is push them close to the group. All that's going to do is make them less likely to talk to you and more likely to talk to a cult member or the cult leader or whatever. So if you have cult family, cult friends visiting for the holidays, this might be useful. And I find it's not only is really good because the effects of it are that it helps a person reconnect with the positive things outside the cult. What it also does is it makes for a really lovely conversation, generally. Like the conversations I've had with cult members where I'm sitting there arguing with them about the ethics and the morality and the fact that they're, brainwashed, which is not really a word I use, but those conversations aren't nice. They are literally full-blown arguments most of the time, and you walk away from them feeling deflated, self-righteous, like they've doubled down, you've doubled down, your relationship's been damaged. So you don't want that. But if you're talking to someone who is in a cult and you're able to get a positive conversation going with them, and they're smiling and they're happy, that's a win. Because they're now connecting with something outside the cult in a positive way. And in their mind, gently, they're being shown that the cult isn't the only way for happiness or whatever. It's a small thing, but it does make a big difference, I think. And again, don't expect them to just be like, right, well, you're right. That's a nice memory from my past. I do remember that I love you. I'm going to leave the cult now. These things take time. This is a slow process. You're planting seeds. And those seeds are going to grow in their own time, maybe if they don't get dug up when they get back to the cult. You just got to do what you can in a situation like this. However, again, if we are talking about someone who is in a dangerous group rather than, a destructive but dangerous group where there are really serious things involved, that's not this video. This video is not for that. The group I was involved with is a good example. They don't control your festive celebrations, so you might end up with family. And in that type of situation, you can gently plant those kinds of seeds. So what you want to be doing, is you want to just be sitting with them and you say to them, hey, like, do you remember whatever from before they were in a cult? You get them to cast their mind back to before they were in the group. And you say, hey, like, do you remember this time? You prompt a memory. And then let them tell the story and ask questions. And you're not trying to get anything. All you want them to do is connect positively, emotionally with this thing and just listen. And listen to how happy they are, because they will probably be happy about this. I did this recently, and honestly, it was a lovely conversation and much better than the conversations usually are. Really, what you're trying to do is encourage them to remember how good things outside the cult can make them feel. Because if they're in a cult, if they're in a group that's promising to have all the answers and they're throwing all their time and their energy into this group, they're probably going to have lost touch with the positive things outside the group. And most cults will make it their work to disconnect you from the positive things outside the group. So that is a good way to not damage your relationship while talking to a cult member, as well as it is potentially something that will plant seeds. Please don't just buy the book that this advice is in and give it to a cult member, though. That is just a terrible idea. It's tempting because, I would want to. But yeah, if you just think, oh, that book sounds good, Steven Hassan's Combating Cult Mind Control, that's a great book on cults, I'm just going to buy that and give that to my Jehovah's Witness family member as a Christmas gift. There's so many reasons that's not going to work. You're better off buying the book, reading it for yourself, understanding it for yourself, and then gently applying in a non-threatening way, gently applying some of the things in the book. But again, the trick is be non-threatening, be gentle. What you don't want to do is put their back up. Just talk to them, have a nice chat, get them to connect emotionally. And if they don't have anything positive in their time before that they can think of, then maybe connect with like a hobby or like an interest that they had. Maybe they play an instrument, maybe they like a particular kind of sport or something. Get them to talk about that a little bit. And then maybe get them to project that into the future, or ask if how they've been doing with the hobby, you know. Gently reconnect them with the positive things of life outside the cult. But don't push too hard. Don't push too hard, because you don't want it to backfire and go the other way. I try not to give advice in videos. I'm like, why should I give advice? Like, what advice have I got to give? So please do, like, just take it with a grain of salt. Do what you do with it. This is something that I do, and it's something that Hassan encourages in his book. If that's enough for you, maybe try it out, but again, be gentle. But yeah, do your own research, please. One point I'll wrap this video up on is, you know, if you're someone who was in a cult and you're not in a cult anymore and your family aren't in a cult, chances are you're going to want to make the most of them. And I honestly, please do, right? Just make the most of that family, cherish them. And if you were in a cult and your family is still in that cult, then chances are you're going to be around, you know, friends and people that care about you and a chosen family. And again, please make the most of that. I've experienced myself having been in a group like that. Relationships, friendships, the word family even gets twisted a bit. But that doesn't mean that these people don't love you. It doesn't mean that you can't really connect with them. And it might not be easy to do, but please do that. Little whistle there in my teeth. Please do that. Whatever the case, if you feel to, please throw yourself into the celebration and be proud that you have broken out of these chains of cult mind control. That's not easy to do. And it can be difficult to think that you have the answer to everything, and then you realize you don't, and you land back on Earth with a crash, and now you have to set your feet on the ground and climb up and like get to know yourself again. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to do, but you're here. You did it. You got out. You got yourself back. I kind of want to quote Lloyd's channel music here, because I feel like it captures this moment perfectly, and it makes me squishy, so I'm gonna. It's a long, hard fall from the top of the world, but it's finally over. And happy holidays. I hope that you have a good one. And I will be here next week, probably. I need to find a way to do something lighthearted. Cults isn't always easy to do lighthearted, but yeah. Thank you everybody for watching this video. I want to say a massive thank you to my patrons. They make it possible to make content like this, and I'm eternally grateful for their support. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you like the kind of content that I'm making and you want to help to support the channel and speed along that podcast that I mentioned, make that podcast happen, then you can do that by becoming a patron. When I hit 15 patrons, then I'm going to be doing that podcast. And if you want to listen to that podcast when it happens, then you can become a patron at the supporter level tier. That's $5 a month. That will give you access to that. If you got something from this video, please hit the like button, and why not stick a comment below and let me know what you thought. And if you want to see more videos like this, while you're here, why not hit the subscribe button and click that little bell thing to get notified whenever I upload a video. I tend to upload every week on a Wednesday, although I'm aware at some point this month, Wednesday is going to be a really silly day to upload. Anyway, thank you for watching, and if you want to watch more from me, then go ahead, stay on the channel, just click onto another video. There's in the card at the end, there's going to be another video there. Click onto that, and I will see you in the next one.